thank you all for participating in the service. Thank you, student praise team. Thank you, you all for singing. Thank you, Jennifer, for that song. Thank you. It's been such a blessing so far. And I hope I don't let you down with the message this morning. I hope that the Lord uses His Word to teach us and to lift us up. Every Christmas Eve during the day, and it has been for many years, I guess pushed up on 10 years now, my son Gray and I have a tradition. And that tradition is sometime during Christmas Eve, and sometimes it's so late doing all the stuff on Christmas Eve until it moves over in sometimes after midnight into Christmas morning. But when he was about 8 or 9 years old, we started this, and now he's 21. We watch It's a Wonderful Life. It started out a VHS tape, you know, that would wiggle and the tracking would eventually catch up and we would watch it. Move to DVD, you know, and it's always in the same place. And when we pull out the Christmas decorations, it comes out and we watch it. And we can basically quote every line of the movie by heart as we watch it. But every year, and he makes fun of me because at the end, every year I cry. I mean, I boo-hoo. I don't just have a little tear in my eye. There's so much tension that great movie has built up leading up to the resolution of it when everything is all right. And you're rooting for George Bailey. You're rooting for the whole town that he's devoted his life to come through for him, right? You're rooting for Sam Wainwright, Sam Wainwright, his rich friend, to come to bail him out of this situation that he didn't create at all for himself. But there's a line at the end of that movie, and really, it's really what jerks at my heartstrings every time. Clarence is the angel that's been sent down to take care of him that Christmas, and I know the theology of the whole thing maybe it's a little bit off, but you understand it's a heartwarming story. But at the end, Clarence leaves him a little gift, an unfinished copy of a Mark Twain book, and in the front he inscribes something. Remember, no man is a failure who has friends. You know what? That's a pretty good principle in this life. Because you can have all the money in the world and be the most lonely, miserable person there is. You know people like that, don't you? You've met people who have climbed the ladder of success, but they've stepped on people all the way up until nobody wants to be around them. Nobody would do anything for them. I've known people like that. You've known people like that. And I would classify that person with all the riches that anything money can buy. I would classify them as a failure. But no man is a failure who has friends. And we're going to look at a classic friendship, a biblical friendship this morning, a friendship that is a pattern even today for us and how we treat one another and how we can be a friend and how we can have a friend. And so I think this relates to everybody in this room this morning, because all of us want to have that person or 2 or 3 people or however many people. And sociologists and scientists tell us that most people can count their true friends on one hand. I've been very blessed, very fortunate. I have many friends that I call close friends. I call best friends, I suppose. I guess there can only be really one best friend. But I don't know why it is, but the Lord has blessed me with people who are my dear, dear friends. People that would go to the mat, and I would go to the mat for them. I remember several years ago, it's been 3 or 4 years ago, in Arkansas, I had a friend named David St. Clair. David and I were very close. We coached our boys up in ball together. Our kids spent the night with one another. We played golf every Monday together for several years. We were just very, very, very close. Funny, so I think I may have told you about this. He and I were coaching Gray and his son that's the same age in basketball, and he was helping out with our youth ministry at the church at the time. And so I was couldn't be at practice that night, and so he handled practice by himself. And our son Gray came in, and you could tell he was upset. And I finally questioned the question. Finally said, "Yeah, Dad, Mr. David said the SH word in practice today." I said, "What? He don't be talking like that around." I was mad at him, you know. He's my friend, but I was mad at him. So Gray said, "Yeah, it was terrible. He said, I finally asked him, I said, what? He said, shut up. I said, well, maybe you didn't need to shut up, okay? So I felt a lot better about it. That's the kind of, the friendship aspect is important. But about 3 or 4 years ago, I got a phone call that was just a terrible phone call. My friend David's oldest daughter, who had a young child, a few-month-old baby, and she was taking the baby to stay with her mom to take care of her. And it was a wet morning, trying to get to work before daylight and turned the curve too fast. Hit a telephone pole and killed his daughter instantly. His granddaughter was really relatively uninjured in the crash and obviously survived. But at that moment, I knew what I had to do, right? I had to change my plans. I had to jump in a car, and Jennifer and I, who's close with his wife, and we drove 700 miles. I helped with the funeral of his daughter, because I didn't know that daughter very well. That's the kind of thing you do for friends, right? That's the kind of thing friends do for you. One of the best pictures of friendship I've ever seen is David and Jonathan from the Bible. And it's found in 1 Samuel. It's also found in 1 Kings. But it reminds us that some people make enemies instead of friends because it's a lot less trouble. It's a whole lot easier to make enemies than it is friends, right? Because to be a friend, to have a friend, you got to be a friend. It requires you to put in the time. It requires you to do those things like drive halfway across the country when they need you. It requires you to be in the places it has to be. It's a whole lot less trouble just to make enemies than it is to make friends. The story of David and Jonathan teaches us the value of friendship. It teaches us the virtue of friendship. And it teaches us everything that we need to know about what we can do to be a friend and to have a friend. And by the way, if you don't know this, nothing is friendlier than a wet dog. Mark that in the bank. That's the best friend you're ever going to have. Listen, in 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 1 through 6, we find this record of a portion of the record of the friendship of David and Jonathan. By the way, I was reading about their friendship in some places, and I came across, in my study, and I came across an online topic, I guess, a chat topic, if you will. And it was from a group of people who they had decided, they had come, put it in their mind that because of the language that the Bible uses and the talking about the love that they had for each other, that somehow they extrapolated that David and Jonathan were lovers. That's terrible. To take a beautiful picture of a friendship between two men and pervert it like that is exactly what the world does. You know that? God gave us a picture of how you can be a friend. And it wasn't because they were lovers. They loved each other. But they certainly weren't romantic lovers in any sense of the word. 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 1 through 6 reminds us of what a true friend is and how to be a true friend. Now, when he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day and would not let him go home to his father's house anymore. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan took off the robe that was on him and gave it to David with his armor, even to his sword and his bow and his belt. So David went out wherever Saul sent him and behaved wisely, and Saul set him over the men of war. And he was accepted in the sight of all people and also in the sight of Saul's servants. Now it had happened as they were coming home, when David was returning from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women had come out of the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul, with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. And it goes on, verse 7. It's not up on the screen, but it kind of goes to the context of this friendship and what they had to overcome to be friends, soul brothers, if you will. So the women sang as they danced and said, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. You think about the pope that was at Jonathan's dad, who was the king. Jonathan was next in line, according to political succession, to be the king. But David had been anointed by God to be the next king, and still they overcame all of that. So why can't we today overcome political differences and be civil with one another? Why do we as Christians make enemies over politics when you know you're not going to convince anybody of anything if they hold to those political beliefs? You know that, I know that, don't we? But we still try, don't we? And we sometimes become a poor witness, even trying to stand up for what we believe is right. Jonathan could have stood his ground. My dad's the king, and I'm next in line, and this David can't. I don't care what God said. I don't care if God anointed him. It's mine. He didn't say anything like that. He loved David. He was willing to lay down his life for David, as any true friend should. Amen? Amen. Amen. So we find from this passage some things about friendship that I want you to pick up and know. The first one, to be a real friend, you have to love your friends better than you love yourself. To be a real friend, you have to love your friends better than you love yourself. The Hebrew literally says in verse 1 that their souls were chained together. They had such an affection for one another. They had such a love for one another that the very heart of who they were, their soul, their spirit, that part that God made that is ours individually, they loved each other, cared so much for each other that their souls were knitted together. They were chained together. As I said earlier, they were the original soul brothers. And it really matters. Think about this. David and Jonathan, they had so much going against their friendship, as I've explained, the political and the social and everything else. David, a shepherd boy. Jonathan, we know about princes, don't we? Anybody watch that wedding yesterday? I know you. Raise your hand, girls, if you watched them. A few of y'all did. You couldn't tie me up with a lot of chains and make me watch that. I'll be honest with you. But that's okay. If you enjoyed it, I'm more power to you, right? But that's a picture of sort of the royalty and the privilege that comes with royalty. And Jonathan had it all and David had none of it. And guess what? They still overcame it. They said something, and this is the key to friendship. They said to one another, our love, our affection, our friendship, our love for each other is unconditional. If you want to know what being a true friend is having unconditional love for someone else. Not what they can do for you, not how can I use them to get ahead in this world. None of those things. It is saying that no matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter what happens in this life, I love you. And I'm going to be your friend. There are no conditions to true friendship. Amen? None. And Jonathan and David showed us that. Verses 4 and 5, if you look at it, they pledged their lives to each other. They made a covenant with one another. The robe that Jonathan gave up, that robe symbolized his status as a prince of the people of Israel. The bow and the sword that it tells us that he gave over symbolized his status as a military commander. The belt that he gave David symbolized his wealth and his privilege. Jonathan was saying, David, my friendship with you is more important than a throne. It's more important than my privilege. That wasn't easy for him to do. But he showed us what real friends do, right? He showed us. He's given to David the most important aspect of friendship. Hear me now. What do you think the most important aspect of friendship is? You say you love the person and all. But let me tell you where the rubber meets the road. And that's this. The most visible, the most tangible evidence of friendship is loyalty. I've got your back. No matter what comes, you can count on me. That's something else we're missing in this world today, isn't it? Loyalty. Loyalty to family, loyalty to a spouse, loyalty to friends, loyalty to a lot of different things It's a lost characteristic in this world, and we need to get it back. I remember years ago, the man that was the best man in my wedding married a girl that was been a friend of mine for a long time. I still see her. I haven't seen him. He was my best friend, but we just kind of lost touch of each other. But I was in their wedding. He was best man in my wedding, and we got married a couple weeks apart. You know, we just were knit together. When you saw him growing up, you saw me, and vice versa. We were just that tight. And I remember afterwards, they got divorced after being married 3 or 4 years, and it was not a pretty divorce. It was ugly. Some of you maybe have experienced that. Divorce is terrible no matter what, right? It's not good for anybody. I realize that sometimes it happens, and I'm not saying that God can't forgive you and move on through all that. That's none of what I'm saying, but it's still ugly, right? And nothing good comes from it. So afterwards, they'd been divorced, and it was pretty ugly. And I ran into his wife and her mother at a restaurant locally, and was talking with them, being friendly with them, and her mother began to run my friend down. I mean, run him. You know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? He's a sorry sapsucker. Yeah, he did it, and I stopped her right there, and I said, "Ma'am, you may feel all of those things about your ex-son-in-law, and you may think that he's a dirty, rotten scoundrel, but he's my friend, and I'm not going to stand here and listen to you do that. If you want to sell it to somebody else, that's your business, but you're not going to tell it to me. You're not going to say those things about my friend to me. I respect you, you're my friend, but I'm walking away," and I did walk away. Well, I saw her, his ex-wife, a few months later. She came to me and she said, "He doesn't deserve a friend like you." So she's still trying to give that little needle. She said, "But I gained so much respect for you because you were a loyal friend to him, even in the most adverse crowd that hated him so much." She told me how much respect she gained for me through that interaction. And I said, "Well, I was just being loyal." You want to keep your friends. You want to have people cry at your funeral. You want to have somebody that you can reach out. Loyalty is the key. Be a loyal friend. Jonathan was giving him these things, showing him that I am loyal to you. Proverbs 18:24 reminds us of this. "A man who has friends must himself be friendly, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." You see, a true friend, look at me, a true friend is someone who will walk in when the whole world is walking out. That's what a true friend is. They don't care what you can do for them. They don't care if you can bring things to their life, or you can enrich them, or you can give them status. All they care about is they care about you. And you can't choose who your loyal friends will be. Because there's another secret I'm going to let you in on. People will let you down. People will stab you in the back. Even people who you think are your closest friends sometimes will be the ones that do it. I'll give you an example. Jesus walked in to that Passover meal and washed the disciples' feet. Who was among those disciples? Judas. The man that was in charge of running the business affairs of Jesus' ministry. Do you think Jesus didn't know what was about to come with Judas? Of course he did. And yet he still girded himself up. He got down on his knees in front of Judas and he washed his feet. You cannot choose who your loyal friends can be. What you can choose is to be a loyal friend. That's the choice you have in your life. You see, to be a true friend, you have to love your friends better than you love yourself. Number two, you have to lift your friends higher in life. To be a true friend, you need to be that rising tide that lifts all ships. You need to be that buoyancy in your friend's life to lift them higher. Not to drag them down, not to lead them into things they don't need to be doing. You need to lift them up. The rest of the story about David and Jonathan is found in chapters 18, 19, and 20. And we certainly don't have time to read read those 3 chapters this morning. But in 1 Samuel 20, verse 41 and 42, we find this. As soon as the lad had gone, David arose from a place toward the south, fell on his face to the ground, and bowed down 3 times. And they kissed one another, and they wept together, but David more so. A lot of things happened. The world crashed in around David. Jonathan's father, Saul, was after to kill him. David had a chance to kill him, but wouldn't touch the one God had anointed to be the king. And it got David. He had almost died on a couple of occasions, and it didn't look good. But that friendship, even when the world was chaotic, even when everything was upside down, that friendship stayed loyal and true. David was sure that Saul was going to kill him somehow. David just knew in his heart that he would. He knew he would eventually be flushed out of hiding. Saul, the king, had way too many men, way too many resources. And so he wanted one last chance to embrace his friend and tell him that he loved him. But in 1 Samuel chapter 23, verse 14 through 16, we read, "And David stayed in strongholds in the wilderness, and remained in the mountains in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul sought him every day, but God did not deliver him into his hands. So David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life, and David was in the wilderness of Ziph in a forest. Then Jonathan, Saul's son, arose and went to David in the woods, and strengthened his hand in God." You see, when David was at the rock bottom of his life, Jonathan sought him out. He went to him. He helped him. He was hiding in the weeds like a dog, afraid for his life, and he comes and he lifts him up, right? That's what a friend does. Do you think about friends you have in your life? You think about the situations they're going through right now. They may be lower than a snake's belly right now, right? They may be so low they can do jump rope under a bed. You know, it may be bad for them right now. What is it you're supposed to do? You're supposed to take the example of this godly man Jonathan, who went to this godly man David and lifted him up. Henry Ford, the great automaker, said, "My best friend is whoever brings out the best in me." That's a good picture of what a friend really is. You see, a true friend loves their friends better than they love themselves. They lift their friends higher in life. And then number 3, if you're going to be a true friend, you have to lead your friend closer to the Lord. Lead your friends closer to God. Back in verse 1, we see the entire context of the entire story in 1 Samuel 18:1, where it says, "Now when he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul." Think about how Jonathan and David met. David had just killed the giant by faith in God. He had gone out on a limb, and he was the hero. And Jonathan saw David with just that slingshot and those stones. And he saw him cut Goliath's head off, delivering the people. He was the champion of the people of Israel. Jonathan saw that, and he was drawn to him. 4 chapters earlier, Jonathan had a belly full of Philistines himself. I don't know if you remember that story. He got tired of them blaspheming God and crying out all the things that went on in war. So he went to his shield bearer and he said, "We're going to go out there and we're going to fight him ourselves." And he himself killed 20 Philistines, Jonathan did, by himself, by putting his faith in God. So he and David were cut from the same cloth, right? They had that affection, they had that draw to one another because they were both courageous soldiers for God. You see, the secret to finding a real friend is to have a heart for God and find someone else who has a heart for God too. That is the bond of friendship. That is something that won't be broken by political arguments or by minor disputes, by major disputes. It'll be something that will stand the test of time. David was a more godly man for having Jonathan in his life. Jonathan was a more godly man for having David in his life. But as I said earlier, you'll never find a Jonathan or a David. You've got to be a Jonathan or a David. You've got to be that person of character. You've got to be that person of strength. You got to be that person that will sacrifice and be there when that someone needs you. Jackie Robinson was a remarkable man. I don't know if most of you know who Jackie Robinson is. He was the first African-American man to play in Major League Baseball. He faced tremendous prejudice as he went out to break that barrier. In a home game in Brooklyn one time, he made a critical error in the field. It was bad. And it cost the Dodgers the ball game. Well, you can imagine those that didn't like him in the first place and didn't think that there was any place in Major League Baseball for that black guy. You can imagine the insults that came down from the stands there in Ebbets Field. You can imagine the names that he was called. You can imagine the vitriol that came. Well, the number one fan favorite of the Brooklyn Dodgers was a shortstop by the name of Pee Wee Reese. And the story goes, and Jackie Robinson relayed the story, that he was at the bottom of the barrel. He was being called names that you wouldn't want a dog to be called, or the worst person in the world to be called. They were just yelling those racial slurs and everything else down from the stands. And Pee Wee Reese, again, was a fan favorite. He could do no wrong. He was a great player, but he was also had the charisma about him. Jackie Robinson said that Pee Wee Reese came over in that moment, not caring what the fans said, not caring. And you got to remember, it's not in this day. It was in the 1940s and 50s, right? In a culture that was completely different than today. But Pee Wee Reese went out on a limb. He walked over. He put his arm around Jackie Robinson and turned, and they faced that crowd and said, if you're gonna get to him, you're gonna go through me. It's Jackie Robinson said that day, what Pee Wee Reese did saved my career. I would not have been the Jackie Robinson that hit 300. I wouldn't be the Jackie Robinson that hit multiple home runs, made catches that were unbelievable. I'd have never been that guy had Pee Wee Reese just said, I'm going to play it safe. I'm just going to stay over at my position. He made the error. He made his bed. Let him lie in it. He saved my career. He said later, the jester spoke more eloquently than any words Pee Wee could have said. This man was my friend. Just remember, whether you're a Hall of Fame baseball player, whether you're an Israelite soldier, or whether you're just a regular Joe, no man is a failure who has friends. Amen? Stand quiet as we pray together. Lord Jesus, I ask you in this moment of invitation, Lord, that you would remind us of what it means to be a true friend. Lord, that you would give us the strength and the commitment and the loyalty and embed it in our hearts to be that kind of friend. And also, Lord, help us to remember that we have no greater friend than you. And Lord, help us be reminded of what you did for us and how you pulled us up out of the miry clay and you saved us, Lord. And Lord, help us look at how you've treated us and let that guide us to treat other people. Lord, let us make that commitment to be friends, truly friends, today. Lord, may it be so in our lives. In your name we pray. Amen. As we sing together.